1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts of books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Hello, and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts. My name is Gary Ballard. I'm the author in question, and this is my rambling stream of consciousness video podcast YouTube thingy. Don't know what to call it. This is currently the first weekend of June, and I haven't recorded a video since, I think January was last time I recorded a video. I have finished reading another novel, and if you're not familiar with this podcast, whatever you want to call it, it's usually me reading my own books and going back over them with a critical eye and, seeing where I could have done things wrong, talking about the process of writing it, some of the characters and stories and whatever, and then occasionally I will go into these various and sundries like this one is, which is where I just kind of talk about stuff that is going on. So I haven't recorded a video since January. Like I said, I've been real busy with a lot of projects, having a new actual job, the day job that pays for me to do this kind of stuff. And so I've just been real busy and haven't written enough and haven't recorded anything. Like I said, I've got a video that's going to be recorded at some point of me talking about my fourth Cyberpunk novel, The Long and the Short Swords. But that's not what this one's about. I thought I needed to record a video and talk about some kind of current events. And it's based around the protests that we've seen for the last couple of weeks. And again, I don't know when this one's going to come out. Maybe this week, maybe the next week. Maybe they'll be done by then, but I don't think they'll be all the way done. We've all been stuck in pandemic quarantine, shutdown sort of thing where our normal routines are busted for months now, since a month and a half after I recorded the last set of videos. That can wear on people. It can be very frustrating, especially when you see the economy going to absolute and utter shit around you. Some of you may have unfortunately lost your jobs, been temporarily laid off, or totally permanently laid off as your business closed. If you did, I'm very sorry. I know how that feels. As of last November, I was laid off from a company that I worked for 20 years, although it was not due to the overall economy so much as pure incompetence by the people who ran the show. Incompetence or vulture capitalism, I won't get into it. So I know the feeling of being out of work and being afraid that you're going to lose your apartment or your house, your car, your, sitting in your house, can't go out, can't do much anything. You don't want to spend money anyway because, you don't know when your next check is coming. And you're worried that every time you hear a truck go by outside, somebody's coming to repo your car. I know the feeling. I've had some financial troubles over the years. Yeah, the life of an independent author is not one of luxury, let me just put it that way. I know the frustration that comes from all that stress weighing down on you. You see something, and it's unfortunately not the first time you've seen it. If it is, you've been living under a frickin' rock. You see a unarmed black man being put down like a dog and held down until he chokes to death by a police officer. Now, George Floyd was accused of trying to pass a bad check, $20 check to buy groceries. I want you to think about that for a second. I don't care where you fall on the side of law and order, police brutality and all that. Even if we assume what the police say about whatever crime he might have been committing was the case, just like with, say, Eric Garner or Tamir Rice or any of the other long list of names we have of black men being executed by police officers, even if we assume every single crime that they've been accused of was true, it still does not give a police officer the right to murder those men. Any discussion that involves saying, well, police have to enforce law and order. Well, yeah, but laws are rules, and rules for police officers have rules of engagement and levels of force that are acceptable. And laws have a list of punishments for which crimes are, justified. The punishments justify the crime. And even if we assume everything that these people were accused of is true, I'm thinking, like Eric Garner selling loose cigarettes. Even if that was true, death is not the penalty for that crime. It's not. At most, they're looking at a few days jail time, maybe, a fine at most. So, confinement and fine punishment, go on. It's a misdemeanor. It's not a big deal. If your argument for absolving the police officers of that crime is they have to enforce the law, well, they also have to be bound by the law. So if a police officer wants to be considered the law, then they need to, by default, follow the law more so than the people they are enforcing the law against, the criminals. So let's just kill that argument right there. No matter what George Floyd did, no matter what Eric Garner did, what they're accused of does not fit the punishment they got, which was death. So you can't claim to be for law and order and say that those men who died got the correct punishment when the people who killed them got no punishment whatsoever. Now, hopefully, that second part of that is not true. Hopefully, in this case, finally, we will see justice for an unarmed black man being murdered by a police officer. Attorney General Ellison of Minnesota is pursuing charges against both that officer and the other officers who just let it happen. Now, I'm getting close to 50 years old. I've been around a while. I've seen a lot of stuff. I'm not, the most active guy. I'm not out in the community that much and all that. I'm a shut-in almost. But I've seen a lot of things. Here's what I think my suburban, white, middle-class folks need to understand. This ain't new. It's not. If you've been around as long as I have, if you've paid any attention whatsoever, you've been told this is going on. Not only is this a 400-year-old example of the systemic racism that this country was built on, that started with the original sin of slavery and just has continued into Jim Crow laws, Reconstruction, and civil rights abuses that have gone on forever, redlining, which happened after the Civil Rights Act, by the way. This shit's been going on forever. And let's just say after the Civil Rights Act, nothing happened. Nothing else happened that was systemically racist, right? Okay. Even if you believe that because you didn't see it, it wasn't in your eyes, basically like I grew up, white suburban, white country folks who, while I knew black people, wasn't necessarily in the black community. You've been told. I was told. I remember in the 80s when I was in high school, two bands in particular, two musical groups in particular came out. NWA and Public Enemy came out in the late 80s, and we got really big in the 90s and all that. And then, if you don't know them, oh my God, you really need to go look into these groups. Those folks was telling you from the jump that this shit was going on. They were telling you the reason the black community doesn't trust the police is because they're straight up executioners. Chuck D talking about in Public Enemy's thing that, the death, that the electric chair was an inward killing machine. They've been telling you. NWA talking about gang violence. It wasn't just about gangs fighting against other gangs and slinging drugs and fucking whores, fucking hoes and all that shit. It was also about, look, I'm in the community and I'm getting rustled by the popo again and I haven't done anything. They've been telling white people and the structures of power for decades that this shit is going on. That the police are out there and they are not enforcing the law correctly, nor are they enforcing it equally. The black community, their statistics you can name all day, is repeatedly punished worse for the same crimes as white people and at a higher rate than white people. And as someone who grew up white as you can be in white bread suburb that, had like 90% Caucasian population in Mississippi, which, by the way, in Mississippi is a pretty large amount of white bread. Even I didn't realize the full extent of just how privileged I grew up. Despite hearing that, because listen, I listened to Public Enemy and I listened to NWA. I loved those guys, Eazy-E and all. I loved them. Still love that music. But even I didn't believe the extent of it. But they've been telling us, and it's pretty rich for wealthy white folks in power to continue to sound the same clarion call of law and order when protesters peacefully suggest that the police perhaps should be accountable for their actions. It's pretty galling to hear white wealthy people in power, our Senate, our president, business leaders and such, clutch the pearls when a bunch of young people come out and say, hey, this ain't right. We need to do something about this. I'm not the protesting type. I am way too, fragile to do it. And I'm certainly not going to go protest in a pandemic because I'm already paranoid about the amount of people in my life that are immunocompromised or in some way vulnerable category. I'll be the first to admit I'm partly talking out of my ass here simply because I'm not out there on the streets, and I probably will not be out there on the streets. You can motherfuck me for that all you want. That's fine. But I do support the people who are out there. I am actually heartened by it. I see young people who continually, just like young people when I was young, continually get made fun of and not taken seriously and talk about how, you don't have the attention span and what do you know about life and you hadn't lived life and all that. I am so pleased to see so many young people out there that don't have to be, who are comfortable and don't have to go out there and they're not the ones that are being targeted. The white kids weren't the ones being targeted, but they're right there alongside the people who are the African American and the immigrant communities who are being targeted, and they're out there sweating their asses off, putting their lives on the line because there is, remember, a pandemic. Putting their lives on the line just to say, hey, enough's enough. This isn't right. And it needs to change. The thing that has infuriated me the most is the response. Now, it doesn't happen everywhere. In a lot of places, way too many places, the police have reacted in exactly the manner they should not. If these people are out here protesting police brutality and trying to point out, hey, you guys are being too brutal. You guys are being you're not being under control. You're not being held accountable for the mistakes you make that, a regular civilian will be held accountable for and is expected to follow. And the police response in so many cities, especially the larger cities, has been vile. And of course, it's always couched in the terms of, well, we have to stop the riot and we have to stop looters and all this. Well, let me tell you, if you've watched any of it, the looting and the violence was the first few nights, and to a large extent, it wasn't most of the protesters. In fact, there's been plenty of circumstantial evidence that right-wing, 3%er, dipshits, racist bastards have been out there looting shit, breaking shit, causing trouble, throwing stuff at cops, as well as cops without uniforms on going out and slashing tires and busting windows and doing all this stuff to make it look like the protests have not been peaceful. But if you notice, since President Dump Truck's little stroll across the St. John's Cathedral, where he cleared peaceful protesters with tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets, those protesters have not been fighting back against the police. As a matter of fact, a lot of them have been standing there with their hands up or on their knees when a damn bullet, a rubber bullet has hit their head, or they've been sprayed with tear gas or pepper spray, doing nothing but holding up signs and holding up their hands and saying, please don't be brutal. Please hold yourselves accountable. They've been attacked. They've been herded like cattle. They've been beaten with batons. They've had sonic cannons fired at them. They've had tear gas rounds fired at them. They've had the fucking National Guard called on them. Rubber bullets bouncing off people's heads, causing brain trauma. 16-year-old kid in Austin gets brain trauma from a rubber bullet fired from a beanbag round fired from a shotgun. 75-year-old man standing in front of the Buffalo police, a line of riot police saying, hey guys, let's just hold down. Push down, fell on his head, blood pours out of his head. For nothing. People just beaten with batons. For nothing. Now, when I first started writing this series, the Bridge Chronicles Cyberpunk series, kind of near future thing, when I conceived of the backstory of the RPG in the 90s, one of the catalyst events that I centered this whole thing around was the riots of 2027. When I first wrote it, it was in 94, when I first started thinking about this and concepting it and writing the history. And fresh on my mind was the LA riots in the 90s after the Rodney King trial. After the cops who beat the ever-living shit out of that guy got off scot-free. And again, that was a situation in LA where for decades people have been talking about LA's police brutality problem. And the only reason this became a thing was because people saw it and couldn't turn their eyes away. Somebody videotaped it. Well, so in the back of my mind when I'm writing this, I'm thinking of these riots.
I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and said they were suckers.